Or 1/8, which is point. Okay, well, to keep it as fractions, it'd be easier to work with. Okay, 1/8 to 1 1/4 is a ratio of 1 to 12. Now look what's happening here. We have very little volume and a whole lot of surface. As a creature gets smaller and smaller like an ant, pretty soon they have so much surface and so little volume, they fall out of a tree, hit the ground and walk off. Elephant falls out of the tree, bam! Right? This problem right here is one of the reasons elephants are wrinkled. Because they have so much body mass, they have to get wrinkles in the skin in order to radiate the heat away. The other reason they're wrinkled is because they're very difficult to iron. But as an animal gets larger and larger, the surface area to volume ratio becomes a serious problem. Now this will be important later, Eric, when we get into this about insects. Since insects don't breathe through their mouth like we do, they absorb oxygen through the skin. Every cell in their body needs oxygen, but as your surface area to volume ratio diminishes, you just simply can't get enough oxygen to supply it because you don't have enough skin. The only way you can get a huge insect is to increase the air pressure. There's a maximum size insects can get based upon the air pressure. So one of the proofs we'll get into later that the world before the flood was a lot different is the fossils we find of giant insects. This is a good proof that something was different. Sometime in the past, there must have been a lot more air pressure because of this surface area to volume ratio problem. Okay, enough on that rabbit trail. I've always wanted to chase it in my seminar. I never got time to. No, we did. Okay, Ganymede is a large planet. I mean, it's a large moon, but compared to Jupiter, it's real tiny. Now, because it is smaller, it has really a greater surface area to volume ratio problem than Jupiter does. So it should lose heat even faster than Jupiter. One of the reasons, if you want to cool something off, you got a hot piece of, potato, for instance, you break it up and spread it out. All you're doing is increasing the surface exposure. When you want to get something to dissolve faster in water, you break it up. Drop in a lump of chunk of ice into your glass, or take the ice cube and crush it and drop it in. Same amount of ice, the ice cube will last longer and dissolve slower than the crystals, the small pieces, because then now more surface is exposed to be dissolved or whatever. It's a principle you can use all through science. Who cares? Point is, Ganymede is still hot and it shouldn't be. And they admitted in the newspaper article here about Ganymede should have cooled solid billions of years ago. Why does it still have a magnetic field? So what they've done over this Ganymede problem, when the space probe sent this data back and said, look, Ganymede has a strong magnetic field. The scientists start with the assumption, well, we know it's billions of years old, so how did this happen? The thought never enters their mind that maybe it's not billions of years old. So they're busy looking for ways to keep their evolution, age of the Earth necessity, billions of years. They have to keep that. What they've said is maybe Ganymede, maybe something passed by Jupiter, and the gravitational pull of this passing star or whatever pulled Ganymede in closer to Jupiter. And because it was closer, the gravity of Jupiter was stronger, so it's pumping it and it's squeezing the surface, and that's what increased the temperature. And then, poof, it popped back out to its orbit where it is now. They've got to come up with all these wild ideas just to try to save the one concept that the universe is billions of years old. So when you read the articles on the web about me, and there's some really interesting ones, some of these scoffers, they write whole books, answering Hovind's, young Earth arguments. It's hilarious to read. When you stop it, they think because they talked, they answered the question. This is a rule teachers soon learn. The longer the kid's essay answer is, the less he knows about it. How many of you ever did one of those essay questions where you tried to know the teacher? You don't have a clue what's going on, so you just talk, and pretty soon they get tired of reading and think, well, he must know what he's talking about. Give him an A. And some of these scoffers went to school and never did learn to overcome that problem, and so they write these long diatribes about me, And they'll say, don't you know that Ganymede is still hot because it got sucked in and was pumped by Jupiter's gravity and then flung back out, you know. Well, you can believe all that if you want. The fact is, it's hot. The fact is, you've got to do all sorts of mental gymnastics to come up with an answer for this, when there is another obvious possible answer. It's not billions of years old. That's the simplest, most logical answer. It's not billions of years old. But I will tell you, to everyone I'm going to give you here, they do have what they claim is an answer to it. But you got to just read it slowly and carefully, and you realize how dumb most of them are. They just are silly. Yes, sir?
The same idea, if we used to believe the Earth was the center of the universe until retrograde motion kept getting in the way.
Right.
It kept going, well, sometimes they move backwards. And
yeah, the circular planets, yeah. The orbits of the planets going epicycles, I know. People get a pet theory and they just try to hang on to it desperately. We probably all do that. Okay, everybody's blind to their own, problems, but they certainly do that with evolution. They will fight desperately to keep the Earth and universe being billions of years old, because otherwise your frog can't turn into your prince, and you got to have that. Saturn and four planets have rings around them. Saturn's are the most visible. We saw them the other night with the telescope. Remember that out there? And it's just like a 2-inch telescope, a spotting scope for the target range. We could see the Saturn's rings. It's really incredible. Saturn's rings are made of rock and ice. Saturn's rings are beautiful as you get up close to them, and there have been several probes have gone by and photographed them, even gone through the rings, and verified they are indeed rock and ice. Extremely cold ice. Now, the reason they're in a ring on the equator, if you had a basketball covered with water and you started spinning it, what would happen to the water? It'd fly off at the equator, wouldn't it? That's the fastest moving point, right. So Saturn is spinning, and you can tell where the equator is on Saturn by where the rings are. 4 planets have these rings. Saturn's are the most visible, these ice and rock rings around them. But the rings are unstable. They're moving around. Different moons are going around Saturn, and some people call them shepherding moons. Each of these moons has a gravitational pull. So you got these moons going around these rings also, and they're pulling these crystals of ice and rock out of their orbit and then dropping them back in. As the moon passes, it loses its gravitational pull. Well, how long can that process stay going and the rings still stay intact? You can't just keep messing it up continually and have it still stay intact. It's a known fact, and there's good information about this in Walt Brown's book, In the Beginning. Got the references right there, page 29 and page 69. He goes through all the details on, the Saturn's rings. The fact is, they're unstable, they're expanding. They can't be billions of years old. So, the evolutionist looks at this, they do all the studies and say, wow, the rings are moving, probably less than 10,000 years old. Then they'll come along and say, see, this proves something nearly hit Saturn 10,000 years ago, got shattered, and got caught in the spin and became the rings. Maybe so. But maybe it's because it's not billions of years old. So their answer to this is a moon or something came by and shattered into fragments, and it's now the rings. And yes, it is less than 10,000 years old. But that doesn't prove Saturn is. That's what they'll say. I had another point on that I was going to make, and I forgot it. In my video number 6, the Hovind theory, where I cover about an ice meteor possibly being the cause of the flood here on Earth. If an ice meteor, and outer space is full of these big comets that are super cold chunks of ice and snow, if one of those came and hit the Earth, or just came near the Earth, or shattered and came through our solar system like a shotgun, fragments of broken ice crystals, that may be where the rings of Saturn came from. They may indeed have been caused, the 4 planets, plus the craters on the other planets, plus the flood here on Earth, might have all been caused in a giant solar catastrophe. Solar system catastrophe. An ice meteor is, in my opinion, the most logical candidate. Now, I call it the Hovind theory because I don't know for sure. I look at all the evidence. Hey, seems to fit. I tell people, if you have a key and it fits the lock, that doesn't prove that's the key for the lock, but it could be, right? And if you have a theory and it fits all the observations, well, maybe you have the right theory. Doesn't prove you do, but it's better than if your key does not fit the lock. Now you know you have the wrong theory for sure. Evolution. It doesn't fit any of the locks. Okay, let's come in a little closer now. We look at our planets in space. We can also look at the fact that so many of these planets have really good orbits, almost perfectly circular orbits, egg-shaped a little bit, but amazingly good orbits.